This is why we measure. I have less space than I thought. I think we're done. Okay, so we measured. I took those measurements, translated them onto grid paper, and so this is the finished product. Lily unfortunately did not document me doing this for a variety of reasons, and so I'm just gonna take you through on a fresh piece of paper how I drew that and came up with this. It's not that complicated, but it might look a little bit complicated. Okay, so this is the Borderline Homestead garden. This doesn't represent the whole garden. It's missing 4 rows at the end, but those are all potatoes, so it's not crucial to my planning. Each square is a square foot. I cut up post-it notes and wrote down all the crops that I'm growing, and so that I can move them around until I have a design that I'm happy with. And I think that's all. I drew it with pencil so that it's easy to erase and redo. I'm just gonna copy, maybe we'll do half of it or something, copy this design onto this piece of paper. So like I said, each square of the grid is a square foot. My beds are a little bit less than 2 feet wide. So we'll go to about there, you'll notice. And then I just follow that all the way 24 feet. So 324. Okay. And there it is. Then the pathways are a little over a foot, so just, it's not all exact measurements. We'll just say that this is a path, and then this starts the next bed. And you just do the same thing over and over. So yeah, it's 24 by about 20 inches. So this is path. That's where wood chips are gonna go, and then there's also about a foot here that's wood chips. And then this is the wider, I don't know if it's 8 or 10 feet wide, the main walkway down the side of all the beds. That's this here or this here. So I take all my crops and decide how much of a row I want of them. Let's take, for instance, strawberries. I want a full row of strawberries that will be established for many years. Same thing with peonies. So these two, I'm gonna plant them and leave them for years. These beds aren't gonna be anything else but peonies and strawberries. So to decide how many I need, each plant has an amount of square feet that it likes. So strawberries, a good rule of thumb is 1 strawberry per square foot. Like that. It doesn't have to be exact, it's just a good tool to get a rough estimate. So if my beds are, let's say they're 24 by almost 2, that's 48. So 48 strawberry plants. And so I would fill in like this, all the way down with strawberries, or I could stagger them a little bit. They don't care if they're in a straight line. And then you do the same thing with lettuce. You can get at least four heads of lettuce per square foot. So let's say this is a square foot. These are each a head of lettuce. And from there, you figure that you need, okay, at least 4 lettuce seeds, but I usually like to double or triple the seed I plant, or scatter sow it and thin it out later to the desired spacing. So I just kind of did it where the orange ones are flowers, the blue ones are fruits, vegetables, and herbs. No, those are fruits. What was I looking at? Oh, marigolds. Marigolds go with tomatoes though. So I did this just so that it's easy to literally take it up, stick it down in a new spot. But, so each row that has one item in it, imagine that's the whole row. I just didn't have pieces long enough to cover the whole row. The ones with 2, it's gonna be half a row of tomatoes, half a row of zucchinis, or half carrots and parsnips, half more annual herbs like cilantro and basil. You might notice, I should have done this earlier, but how on each of the crops there's a number next to it. I did that later. I initially just started with each crop and arranged it how I wanted it to look in the gardens, and which things I wanted to plant next to each other, which things grew taller to provide shade, that kind of stuff. I took my measurements, laid out all the crops that I wanted, and then went through to see how many of each item was going to be planted in each row. And from there, you can calculate the seeds or plants or bulbs or tubers that you need.
Did the curvature of the beds make any difference?
You know, I didn't take that into account. I just went ahead and did straight lines. It's not going to be exact. Plants don't care. So
How should people measure if their rows are kind of mounded up like yours are, where it's hard to see the exact edge?
you want to only measure the growing space. So you don't measure the sloped sides unless you're growing on them. For my rows, they are a bit wider than 20 inches, but the level growing space is 20 inches by 24 feet.
Do you have a couple measurements then? You have like a growing space measurement and then an actual row width measurement?
No, I only do the growing space measurement, and then whatever is left over is just path or sides. You don't need that thorough of a calculation unless you were doing more of a terraced garden, which mine is loosely terraced because it's on a hill. You would just add up the full combined length of all the beds and paths if you were measuring for like fencing.
Oh yeah, you wouldn't like measure the beds and then add them together. You would just go out there and go to the corners.
Exactly, yeah. So if you wanted to find out your total growing space, you would measure the growing area of each bed and then add all that up so that you know if you're growing in 1,200 square feet, 500 square feet, even if it's all divided up amongst different beds with pathways in between. It's kind of fun to know that. And if you were planting only a couple crops and you knew that, okay, 300 square feet is going to be sunflowers, well, it's 300 seeds you would need because sunflowers are 1 per square foot. But if you're doing something like, so you're growing bulk carrots, you can grow 16 at least carrots per square foot. If you had 300 square feet of carrots, I need a calculator if I was going to do that. But you would have
a lot.
Many hundreds of carrots. And so you wouldn't have to calculate each bed. You just say, okay, I'm doing 5 beds of carrots. The total square footage of all those beds combined is this 300 square feet. And then from there you order your seeds.
I think it would be 4,800 carrots.
4,800. 16 times 300? That makes sense. That's a lot of carrots. I'm not growing that. I'm doing about 14 square feet of carrots.
That's much more manageable.
Yeah.
If someone is building like raised beds, do you have to measure how deep the beds are?
Depends on what you're growing. Most plants only need the top about 6 inches of soil. If your beds are, say you use 2x8s and fill them up most of the way, that's going to be plenty of soil. You could even build that up on top of like gravel or pavement. And if you had 6 to 8 inches of soil, you're going to be able to grow most things. Yeah, root crops, most carrots aren't going to get longer than that. I think potatoes would be the main thing that you want to go deep with. It's just you want to make sure that the soil is richer, deeper down.
Yeah, that's a good point. If I was going to plant potatoes and I was envisioning them growing down there, I would be thinking about how deep they were going to grow, but then also thinking kind of backwards about it, where I'm not just thinking about the plants, I'm thinking about the space of the potatoes down there.
Yeah.
I guess you kind of already answered that. Each plant does have a specific distance that it likes to be from its neighbors. And so if you hit that mark...
The square foot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you hit that mark, then everything happening underneath the dirt will be okay.
Yes. Plants prefer to be close together, and so when in doubt, plant them closer, unless it's a tree. Trees, plant them farther than you think. But in general, so square foot gardening is awesome. It's a really good rule of thumb. I want to see more information on intensive spacing. I'm sure there's books and posts out there. I just haven't done much research. Intensive spacing takes square foot gardening and then condenses it even more to maximize your harvest. That's what most market gardeners do, is do intensive crop spacing. You take your measurements and you say you're going to do intensive spacing, you might need to double the amount of seed that you get. You just want to decide ahead of time what kind of spacing you want to try.
Do you need richer soil for that?
If you're doing a regenerative setup like I have, you just add compost every year, once a year. Then the soil will keep building itself up, and the wood chips on the sides also helps to build the soil in the rows because the fungal networks will want to connect, and that's a whole nother video that we can do later in the summer, probably when we can see the fungi. So this is part of a series that we're doing. Doesn't have a name. I was gonna say it's called, basically we're documenting my entire process start to finish. Day we start right after Christmas, and we're gonna go all the way until at least next December. We might keep going with these videos, but we're gonna show you how I plan, how I order seeds, how I pick varieties, all the way into planting, harvesting, watering, dealing with pest problems, just documenting everything that happens throughout the year and a year of garden life. Thanks for watching.